In this module, we're going to cover the foundational concepts of the profit and loss statement and how you can use those terms to go and engage executives to drive bigger deals. So, why should I care about this? Let's start with a very simple example. A couple of years ago, I was training a group of highly experienced sales executives at a very large, very fast-growing SaaS company. We sat down in the room in Chicago and I asked them a question, very simple question. I said, what are you going to pitch to Macy's and to whom? And the team scurried away, went fast, sales is competitive. After 8 minutes, 2 of the reps came back and they said, oh, I've got the answer. Fantastic. Okay, great. So Rep A said, I'm going to go pitch to the chief marketing officer all about omni-channel experience. And Rep B said, I want to go pitch to the chief merchandising officer about pricing optimization. Rep A or Rep B, who's right? Well, how do you know? You need to kind of go to the customer and go and speak to them and try and figure out and engage them. Is this a real deal? Right? That's where it's wrong. Actually, you can do a lot of research on Macy's. Everyone knows Macy's. You go into the stores, you can shop online. But actually, you can look at their financials and understand what's fundamentally going on with their business. It just so happens to be that Macy's has one of the highest gross margins in the industry, at least at this point in time 2 years ago. So they were buying low, all of their clothing, and they were selling high to us consumers in the stores. From a merchandiser perspective, not a lot of pain and urgency right there. However, the CMO has been investing into all sorts of online advertising and automation and ways to improve their e-commerce sites for optimization. And they haven't quite figured it out just yet. So their efficiency's not so good. Now, what would you want to go pitch them? The first rep actually was kind of close with the chief marketing officer, but the solution's probably a little bit different. The CMO's been talking about their investments in omni-channel experience. And so targeting an omni-channel experience discussion, bringing examples around where are the opportunities and case studies where this company's worked before, those are what's going to resonate. And that's what we're going to teach you here, how you can uncover for any given company who to go and engage with and what to engage them with. So as you can see from the example, Rep A was able to use the financials and understand how to anticipate their customers' needs, and they were then successful. Thankfully, in this case, this was just a training course. So now Rep A and Rep B, plus the next reps in their team, they all were able to go and execute upon this and be highly successful in their fiscal year. Okay, so let's get started and start to get into how you can use this information and how you can interpret the P&L. So just as we're thinking about our day-to-day expenses, we start our month with a cash balance in our bank account. We then earn some income from our wages and our cash balance goes up. We then have expenses like our rent. We also have then groceries. We have other types of entertainment. It could be travel. There may be school fees. That then leaves you with a cash balance at the end of the month. Hopefully your cash balance at the end of the month is higher than where it was at the beginning of the month, or hopefully not lower than where it was at the beginning of the month. That way you're creating value. Think about a business in very much the same way. It's all about those income streams of the cash from the revenues and the sales they're making, and then the deductions through the month in terms of the expenses that they face, whether that's from salaries of employees all the way through to the rent that they have to pay on their offices. We're going to get really practical, and in the example we're going to run through in the rest of the modules, we're going to talk about a company that a lot of people know, Starbucks. How does Starbucks make money? Well, everyone knows that you kind of go into the store, you go fill up the cup of coffee, or you order a cup of tea, whatever that might be, or the latte, and that makes up a large proportion of their revenue. Actually, it's around 61% of their revenues coming purely from the beverages. Okay, great. So we know Starbucks is making a lot of money from the beverages, but where else are they making money from? Well, they make money from their foods, and the paninis that you might be buying in the Starbucks or any of the food there, that's another 16%. So total, that's 77% then of their total revenue. Where's the other 23% coming from? Interestingly, a lot of those take-home packets you might buy at a Costco or you might get at a Safeway, that's making up another proportion. They also have some Nespresso pods that they partnered up with Nestle. And lo and behold, they also have loyalty cards. A lot of us go and fill our money onto their loyalty cards, probably on your mobile now, and that sits then with Starbucks. They earn roughly about $130 million a year purely on the interest alone from the money that we put on those loyalty cards. So another way of saying that is Starbucks is like a bank. They're taking our money, putting it onto the cards, and then they're earning interest on that money. That gets us to $21 billion in revenue. And now you know how Starbucks makes money. What we're going to turn our attention to is another metric called revenue growth. What we're looking for here is how much did that revenue grow or shrink year over year. I like to look at this over the last 3 years or the last 5 years, and that helps me to get a sense for, is this company growing or shrinking? Companies that are growing typically are doing better than companies that are shrinking. When we look at Starbucks, they obviously had a great 2019, a great 2018 as well. 2020, not so good. A lot of that was due to the pandemic. A lot of people weren't going into the stores. Actually, it was about half of their fiscal year, which accounted for the pandemic into their fiscal year. But overall, not so good. So minus 12% wasn't a great result for them. I can see a downward trend. I'm sure they're going to bounce back. But how are they doing against their competitors? And some of their competitors include companies like Peet's and Keurig. When you compare those numbers, actually, Starbucks is not looking so great actually in the latest fiscal year. So it's good to look at the numbers historically. How are they trending? But also, how are they trending versus peers? In addition to that, what you want to know is look at the segments. We talked about beverages, we talked about food, and then they have this other business line, which includes some of those loyalty cards, but also their channel partnerships. How are they doing there? What we can see is actually that the revenue on their beverages business is growing very healthy over the last couple of years. Even in their foods business, not bad at all. But their channel partnerships, not so well. They actually grew by 0% in 2019, which was more of a normal year. And actually they were down 14% in the latest 12 months. So channel partnerships now is probably the area with the most pain and urgency at Starbucks. Companies like Starbucks who are struggling with growth and also have got some challenges on their channel sales, they're typically looking for solutions that are going to help them to bump that up. Things like pricing optimization, things like channel sales development, things like customer journey mapping, areas like branding and advertising to get people back into their stores, areas like digital customer experience. All of these are going to be areas, typical solutions that could be of interest to them. Okay, so now we know how they make money. What we're going to go figure out now is where do they actually spend some money. So we're going to go into the first cost category. It's called COGS, cost of goods sold, or direct costs. So you think about that cup, actually that's a large part of the costs that go into making the beverage. Also with the coffee beans, the barista, there's the lighting in the stores, there's the water that goes into the Americanos, there's the rent on the stores. Think about all of those components as making up the cost of the goods sold. Now, when you take the revenue and you deduct the cost of goods sold, that leaves you with gross profit. Take that gross profit, that number, you want to divide that back in to the revenue, that gives you the gross margins. That's a really useful metric so you can understand how a company's performing on their direct cost, what they call their overall efficiency of their core business. So think about that trend number now, and you're starting to see that those gross margins are not doing so great. They've actually been slipping quite consistently all the way over the last 5 years. Last year was a very unusual year for Starbucks, but generally speaking, we can see quite a lot of a decline here. When we look at this in comparison then to some of their closest competitors like Keurig and Peet's, we can also see that they're underperforming in terms of those gross margins as well. So just like the revenue growth, gross margins is an area of pain and urgency that Starbucks are experiencing today. Now, why is that useful to you? What kind of solutions does a company that's suffering from gross margin challenges typically go and invest into? Well, things like pricing optimization, demand forecasting, supply chain optimization. It could be anything related to how they can improve the efficiencies in their business. But also some of the key buying groups are going to be around supply chain, could be in their finance department, could be in their manufacturing business as well, logistics, sourcing, procurement. So you've got some solutions and you've got some buying groups now that potentially going to be quite interested in hearing from you if you have solutions that solve their needs. So now let's move on to the second cost driver, the indirect costs, the SG&A, or better known as selling, general, and administrative. These are all of the costs. Think about any cost that goes into Starbucks outside of the coffee cup or the panini in the store, anything which is indirectly associated with running their business. So sales, marketing, finance, HR, IT, these are what they call indirect costs. And it's important to look at that number as a proportion of the revenue, SG&A over revenue, to understand their overall SG&A efficiency. What we're looking for is for that number to be going down over time. We want a company to be improving its efficiency by getting more scale as they grow. As we look at the numbers then for Starbucks, unfortunately, that number's been growing over the last few years. So that hasn't actually been working in their favor. But when you compare them versus their peers, companies like Peet's and Keurig, they're doing very healthy. So relative to the peer group, SG&A is quite efficient for Starbucks. So companies who are inefficient in their SG&A, they're typically looking to go and invest into things like people operations, things related to marketing automation, could be areas of omni-channel experience, could be something related to collaboration, anything that's going to improve the efficiencies in their indirect cost base. Now, that doesn't happen to be a big major pain point here for Starbucks, but what you're looking for, as you can see, revenue growth, gross margins, and SG&A is where is the pain, where is the urgency in the client's business. That identifies key buying groups that you can go and engage and solutions that will help you to drive bigger deals. Bring this all together. We've got the revenue, we've got the COGS, we've got the SG&A. When you deduct the COGS and the SG&A from the revenue, you get to EBITDA. You've probably heard of that term before, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. You don't really need to remember all that. EBITDA is profit. Essentially, the profit that Starbucks makes as a percentage of revenue is their profitability margin. Every company is looking to improve their profitability as a business. That means that they can pay more wages to their staff. They can go and invest into more activities, events, training for their teams. They can go and invest more into their customer relationships. So how has Starbucks profitability been performing overall relative to Peet's and Keurig? Well, we can see actually that it's been relatively par with Peet's a couple of years ago, but then through the pandemic, through 2020, this number deviated quite a bit. There's certainly room for improvement on EBITDA. We'll cover a little bit more about that when we get to module 3 in executive compensation. This is an important metric for Starbucks overall. So my final takeaway then for this module is really when you're looking at any one of these metrics, whether it's revenue growth, gross margins, or SG&A efficiency, try to think through some of the key questions and answer those through the data. Are they growing or shrinking? Is it better or worse than peers? What are their forecasts going forward? Does this look like an area of pain and urgency? Do you have solutions that can go and address any one of these key value drivers? Well, that's enough from me around Starbucks. I'm getting thirsty. I'm going to go get my next cup of Americano.